Alright, I'm going to call this video the good, the bad, and the ugly. Last several weeks I have got my chassis to the point where it's a running, driving chassis, other than that fuel or oil in it. But other than that, it is a complete chassis. There's been all kinds of little stupid things that's happened. Some of them good, some of them bad. Ultimately all okay. It came out really, really nice. Really pleased with it. But just a bunch of quirky little stuff. Take a look at the chassis here while I'm sorting the next part of this. First thing that happened, it really irritated me. The speaker template. I've put these speakers in a bunch of different cars over the last 20 years. Never had any problem. Been using this template. This is a template that comes on the box with the speakers. It's what I use to do the CNC pattern to cut the holes to put the speaker in. You can see how old it is by all the dust on it. But it was off. It was just simply off. This is the speaker this is where it comes on the box. Just out of curiosity. Well, I'll be dang. They changed the speaker and the pattern. There's my 3/16. Well, I guess I better save this and throw this 20-year-old one away. I don't know why they would do such a thing like that, but there's that problem solved, mystery solved. Next thing, my rib nut gun. We talked about these rib nuts quite a bit. Squeeze this and it puts that rivet in. It's a threaded insert. Got to noticing it wasn't squeezing them all the way. Got to looking here. I have mushroomed my piece here, and my super expensive Harbor Freight rib nut gun going in the trash to be replaced by this other super expensive Harbor Freight rivet gun. Speaking of Harbor Freight items, a heat gun that I use to put this trim on. If you'll heat it, it'll go around the corners a whole lot easier, and then when it cools off, it stays the shape. Well, I was putting this piece right here in, this carpet insert here. I accidentally ran the heat gun across it, and it just melted that carpet. So I had to pull that out and replace that. Learned my lesson there. I'll be a lot more careful with the heat gun from now on. Brake lines, I've done them 100 different ways on this thing. Redesigned them, trying to get it to work better. Spent a lot of time on the design, coming around here, through here, getting room to be able to put wire ties and hold it in place. And when I finally got it all done and it went from paper into actuality, I had a brake line running right through the coil in the coil spring. Figured that's probably not acceptable. Was able to redesign it after I saw it. Really, really happy finally with the way that brake line on the back works there. Same way with the front. I spent a whole lot of time. It was really, really tight trying to get this thing to work and get your fingers in there to put it in. Got all that the way I wanted it. The problem with this is there's a loop here that goes on the front. This is exaggerated, but this loop, as the tire comes out, turns, goes in, whatever, that loop gets bigger or smaller. When that loop is big enough to go out that far, it goes way too far down, starts interfering, and just was not a good design. I finally got this. Let me open this to get some light. Finally got a design up here I really, really like. Instead of going and doing that loop, I've come down on the A-arm and around, and now there is no loop. That just follows the tire motion. Really, really like it, and did away with all this really cramped area trying to get that brake line up into there behind the steering knuckle and so forth. Got to save my detail here that I really like. Only casualty of it, this line right here had to be 3 inches longer to make it work, so I've ordered a new line, and this line right here will go in the spare parts box. But what looked good on paper didn't quite come out in actuality, and now I finally got brake lines the way I really, really like them. This rear scoop, apparently Smetting is using a taller distributor cap now because it was interfering with the bottom of the scoop. This is the old bracket here that went under here. I cut that to relieve it and see what I couldn't do there, and didn't like that, so I went to a two-piece deal of this, like this, which was easy to do, simple, just re-CNC'd that. Got me some clearance back here. The other thing it did was I was able to reposition it this way just a little bit. So now these brackets that come with the scoop that the carburetor goes to, I used to have to cut that. It's underneath, it's hid, nobody knows it's there but me, but that doesn't look really, really pretty. Now then I don't have to cut it, I can use the original one like this, and it goes under there no problem whatsoever. The scoop itself, you got the engine mounts, the carburetor, so forth, and the scoop coming this way, and you get all this interior and this bulkhead piece and so forth coming this way. There's a whole lot of things coming both different ways that have got to come together for the scoop to mate up right here, and it's just exceptional. I am just so pleased with the clearance and the way all that lines up and everything. So that worked out just like it ought to on paper. One thing that I did do on that though, I originally had it where this trim lock piece, that's just your chassis goes here and then a bubble goes here, and this stuff's used on everything you can imagine, and I was using that to seal the scoop. Well, the problem with this stuff, you got to know what the design limits are. If it turns too sharp a corner outboard, it flattens it out. If it's inside, it starts to wrinkle it. Can you see that wrinkle there? Do I need to shut that door? So I got thinking, and this particular style of piece is only used right there. Got to thinking about it, and I said, well, wait a minute. I've got this stuff right here that's a D-shaped bubble deal. That's the same stuff we use in all the weather seal on the doors, same stuff that seals the bulkhead here, and so forth. What if I used it in there? Now I can turn a nice radius without any problem. It's a lot more spongy and a lot more resilient than that other piece. And then I'll just use my typical trim piece to go around this back side right here, and that'll make it really pretty. It'll also push that bubble just a little bit farther forward, which now I don't have to cut this piece like we just talked about. So just a little bit of tweaking there. Really, really much nicer solution for a problem there. Got rid of a part that doesn't exist on the car except right there. The e-brake, the electric e-brake with the belly button down here, that you can see the e-brake moving when you do this. I had to redo the bracket just a little bit on it. This is a guide for the this is a guide for the bracket. Had to retweak that just a little bit, no big deal at all. Same deal with the engine hour meter deal. This was the original design, but it presented problems with how to do the lettering. So we just redid that, did the lettering there. Whole lot nicer, cleaner looking piece. Gas pedal. We talked about this. There's some video some time ago. I've done that 10 or 12 times with the origami and the ACM stuff, trying to build a gas pedal bracket. And it just still wasn't quite strong enough to be rigid when the adrenaline goes to your foot for the gas pedal. So I finally redone that out of aluminum instead of the ACM stuff. Gas pedal goes in like so. Really, really happy with that redesign. The glove box hinge, when I went to the ISO 280 fuses, had to make the box just a tiny bit wider. When I did, now that's too wide right there. That had been, the lettering had been CNC'd into that. I'm going to do away with that and do the lettering just like we've done now. but I had to make that a little narrower, and I'm picking up that lettering this afternoon that'll go right there on the hinge. But just a stupid little thing that had to be dealt with. Speaking of stupid things, remember the water pump issue with the water pump that the pulley wouldn't work after all these years. Got the other water pump bolted on just fine, looked just exactly like it was supposed to, and everything assembled. One other odd thing that happened, got all the wiring done, got everything to the fuse box, got the console in. I've got one red wire that is coming out of the console that just doesn't have a reason to exist. Don't know what it is, why it is, where it is. And you know, when you build something, you always come out with an extra nut or bolt, and that's no big deal. But when you come out with one extra wire, especially when it's red indicating it's a hot wire, what do you do? So I tore in all that after I said, there's just nothing in there. There's no system in there that is unaccounted for. And when I tore into it, I realized that what it is the low fuel warning light off of the fuel sender unit that's down there. I was looking at all the wires going everywhere. I forgot that sender was under there. Finally got that stupid detail resolved. So far I've been talking about all the negative and stupid things and redos, and now let's talk about some good. First thing, that lettering on everything, just fantastic. Just really, really like the way all of that lettering has come out. Andre at Signs Up just really done me a nice job on all that, and I want to take a look at that again. The ISO 280 harness, the glove box, all that, extremely pleased with every bit of that. The interior, come around here and see. This is that shadow gray metallic. The longer this paint cures, the bluer it gets. But if you can see the blue in that paint, the blue in that, blue was, it's not showing up. Oh well. Blue was not on the radar on this, but it looks good in person. My e-brake stuff, we talked about it a little bit, works great. Miguel Jimenez from Willwood was here a couple of weeks ago. He went over that with me. Willwood's got some more surprises and stuff for me. I'm supposed to meet with them at SEMA, and we're going to maybe tweak on that e-brake just a little bit. Speaking of those speakers on the side, I put those speakers in and I realized that there wasn't enough contrast, so I went to my handy Steelit stuff, and this ring here that's a separate piece, I stainless steel that to give that speaker a little contrast. By putting that ring, which is optional in, it also gave me a little extra room to waller out those holes. The headers back here, we have gone Performance 2 has a 2.5 inch bend instead of a 3 inch bend. That 1/2 inch was very critical on the headers. I've redesigned the headers. That's a 2.5 there. It comes straighter out here and up. On the other side, there's not an issue being close to the starter or anything. That 1/2 inch made a world of difference on header design. Much simpler, much easier to build. This is the same 2.5 inch pre-bent that is the intake system that goes here and here.
14.
Okay. Pro Sport gauges. We have gone from VDO to Pro Sport. Much nicer, much better looking gauge, programmable gauge. All of them, you can set your warning lights, you can set the background color, all kinds of cool stuff on that. They have a harness built in, which kind of surprised me. And the sender unit for the oil and temp gauge has its own built-in sender unit. Now, well, that's great, except it's not going to be long enough for a mid-engine car, and I'm going to have to go in and splice into those 20-something gauge wires and all that, and that was going to be a big problem. Well, okay, let's see. Is it still going? Okay. Let's see if we can splice in and see if we can see if it's long enough, and as it turns out, it is long enough for a mid-engine car. So all that wiring is done. The other thing that was really, really cool about the Pro Sport stuff, they all daisy chain together. This comes with the gauges, and one plugs into the other, plugs into the other, plugs into the other, and instead of just, this is cool, instead of having to wire each gauge individual, each light individually, a couple of wires and your whole dash is wired. I want to put this in perspective a little bit. If you have 6 gauges, you have a positive, a negative, a sender, and so forth, that's about 36 connections. If you got 8 lights in those gauges, positive, negative, idiot lights, so forth, that's about 80 total. Well, that's 32 and then 80 total on connections at your gauges. Looking over at the fuse box, if you have 30 fuses in and out on the fuse to the source, so forth, times 4, that's 120. 10 relays, 4 pins per relay, 8 connections in 4 pins. There's about 200 total connections there. Let's call it 240 total connections. So there's 80 and 240, 8, 16, 24, 32. That's 1/4 of the total connections of the wiring over there, turned into 4 connections. If it takes 4 days to wire a car, that's 1 full day that got eliminated by just these little daisy chains that plug in a matter of seconds. That was just pretty dang cool. Besides that, these are competitively priced. The cost of the GPS unit is way better than the cost of the GPS unit on the VDO stuff. And I'm just pretty happy with all of it. That gauges kind of made up for everything else it did. Let me look here. I know this one's running really long. Let me look here and see what might or might not added. I think that's it. I think we're going to cut this a little short. Why don't you just walk around one time and shut her off? Or just, never mind, just go ahead and shut it off.